All right, so ever get that feeling like, man, I wish I had a do-over in life?
I think we've all been there.
Right. But what if you had infinite do-overs? Like, what if you could hit the reset button, not just once, but forever?
Now that's a thought-provoking concept. And actually, it's something we're diving into today.
That's right. We're tackling Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence.
Buckle up, folks. This one's a mind bender.
So basically, imagine living your life exactly as it is, with all its ups and downs, all the good, the bad, and the embarrassing.
Every awkward first date, every questionable fashion choice, it's all there.
And then once you reach the end, you hit rewind, and you do it all again.
And again, and again. For eternity.
Yeah. Every joy, every heartbreak, every boring Tuesday afternoon staff meeting, it all just keeps on repeating.
Now, to be clear, Nietzsche wasn't saying this is literally happening. It's more of a thought experiment.
Right. A philosophical mirror to hold up to ourselves. A way to examine how we're living right now.
Because if you knew you were going to relive every single moment forever, how would that change your perspective?
I mean, honestly, just thinking about it makes me kind of anxious.
I get that. It's definitely a lot to process.
Like, are we talking every cringeworthy moment, every bad decision?
Yep, every single detail. But it also includes all the amazing moments, the triumphs, the moments of pure joy.
Okay, so maybe not a complete horror movie then, but still, that's a pretty intense concept to grapple with.
It definitely forces you to confront the weight of your actions, right? Imagine a demon appears and says, hey, guess what? You're going to live this exact life over and over again forever.
Oh, man. I don't even want to think about what my initial reaction would be. Probably sheer panic.
I think a lot of people would feel that way. But then maybe some other feelings would start to emerge.
Like maybe a sense of responsibility. I mean, if I'm stuck with this life forever, I better make sure it's something I can actually stomach.
There it is. That spark of active engagement. See, eternal recurrence isn't about passively accepting fate. It's more of a call to action.
So you're saying it's about making sure we're actually living in a way that we'd want to repeat forever.
Exactly. It challenges us to examine our choices, our values, our priorities. Are they truly aligned with who we are, who we want to be?
So this isn't about chasing some fleeting sense of happiness or just like avoiding all discomfort.
Not at all. It's about embracing the totality of the human experience, the light and the shadow, the triumphs and the stumbles.
I mean, that makes sense if you think about it. If every single action echoes through eternity.
Then suddenly we become a lot more aware of the choices we're making, moment to moment. Each decision carries a lot more weight.
It's like every choice we make becomes a brushstroke on this massive, like infinite canvas of eternity, you know?
I like that analogy. And we are the artists of our own lives, responsible for creating the masterpiece, or, maybe the less than masterpiece.
So how does this whole idea differ from nihilism? Aren't they both about meaninglessness?
That's a good question. Nihilism often says that life just inherently has no meaning, like nothing we do matters.
Right, right.
But eternal recurrence, it's kind of the opposite. Instead of meaninglessness, it's like we're confronted with, well, almost an overwhelming amount of meaning. Because every little choice matters. Every fleeting moment.
Okay, that's an interesting distinction. It's almost like the opposite of nihilism. So if every choice matters every moment, then what about all the regrets, all the, like, if only moments?
That's a crucial part of this whole concept. See, eternal recurrence encourages us to confront those parts of our lives that, we might prefer to just sweep under the rug.
Yeah, we all have those.
But if we're going to relive these moments infinitely, well, wouldn't it be better to try and transform those if-onlys into something more, something better?
So it's not about dwelling in the past, it's about learning from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To see those experiences, even the painful ones, as integral parts of who we are.
Okay, so far this is all very heady stuff, but I'm wondering, how does any of this help people in the real world? Like, can this idea of eternal recurrence actually help people live better lives?
Absolutely. That's what we'll be digging into in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we're going to get practical with it. But before we do, I think we should talk a little bit about the man behind the idea, Friedrich Nietzsche himself. Didn't he have, like, a pretty tough life?
Oh, he definitely faced his share of challenges, isolation, illness, you name it.
So you'd think that would make him lean toward, a more pessimistic view of life.
It's true, but that's what makes his embrace of eternal recurrence so remarkable, I think.
So it's not about doom and gloom.
Not at all. It showcases his commitment to life affirmation, even with all the struggles. Like he was saying, hey, life is tough, but it's still a gift.
That's pretty inspiring, actually.
It's about cherishing each moment, even the hard ones, seeing it all as a story worth experiencing. again and again.
Okay, that's a perspective I hadn't really considered before. It makes his ideas a lot less about despair and more about, I don't know, radical acceptance or something.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's about finding meaning in the face of, well, in the face of everything, all the chaos and uncertainty that life throws at us. And speaking of facing challenges, this actually ties into another one of his concepts, the Übermensch.
Ah, the Übermensch. Isn't that often translated as, like, Superman?
Yeah, but that's a bit misleading. It's closer to Overman.
So not someone who flies around in tights, but...
Right. Not exactly a comic book character. It's more of an ideal, a vision of someone who not only accepts eternal recurrence, but fully embraces it.
So this Übermensch, they're not just going with the flow, they're like actively shaping their destiny.
Exactly. Transcending limitations, creating their own values, living with a sense of radical freedom and responsibility.
Okay, so it's not about resigning ourselves to fate, it's about taking control of our lives, creating something worth repeating.
Exactly. Recognizing that we have the power to shape our own eternal narratives. And that's where we'll pick up in the next part of our dip dive. Stick around, because we'll be exploring how to actually apply this concept to your life.
Welcome back to our deep dive into eternal recurrence. Where we left off, we were talking about Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch and how this idea connects to living a life worth repeating.
Yeah, it's all very thought-provoking stuff, but I gotta admit, I'm still wrestling with how to actually apply this to, my everyday life. Like, it can't just be about existential dread, right?
It's definitely not about wallowing in anxiety.
Yeah.
In fact, contemplating this idea can actually help us live more fulfilling lives. Like, let's say you're trying to make a tough decision. Could be anything, big or small.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Sure. Let's say you're thinking about changing careers or maybe ending a relationship, anything that feels really weighty.
Yeah, okay, I've definitely been there.
Now, imagine applying the lens of eternal recurrence. Ask yourself, would I be okay making this choice over and over again, forever? Whoa, suddenly that promotion that requires me to move across the country doesn't seem so appealing if I have to keep doing it forever.
Right. It really shifts your perspective, doesn't it?
It's like you're not just thinking about the short-term pros and cons anymore. You're forced to think about the long game. The really, really long game.
Exactly. It encourages us to consider not just the immediate consequences, but the potential ripple effects across countless repetitions.
So it's not just about what feels good right now. It's about creating a life that I can genuinely embrace, even with all the inevitable challenges.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the idea of aligning our choices with our core values. Like, if this choice is something I have to repeat forever, does it actually resonate with who I am at my deepest level?
I'm sensing a theme here. Authenticity, right?
Right. Definitely. Eternal recurrence is all about living authentically. And that applies to our goals too. Think about it. If you knew you were going to live this life on repeat, what kind of life would you want to create? What goals would truly excite you, not just for this one go-around, but for countless lives to come?
Man, that's a powerful question. It's like suddenly all those external pressures, like, what society expects of me, keeping up with the Joneses, it all kind of fades away.
It does, doesn't it? It becomes about crafting a life that feels deeply meaningful to you, regardless of what anyone else thinks. And it's not about achieving some perfect state of happiness either. Remember, we're embracing the full spectrum of human experience.
Right. The good, the bad, and everything in between.
Exactly. It's about finding purpose and joy in the journey itself, in the messy, imperfect, beautiful unfolding of life.
This is starting to sound a lot like gratitude practice, really tuning into the present moment and appreciating what we have instead of always wanting more.
That's a fantastic connection, because gratitude becomes even more potent when viewed through the lens of internal recurrence. Like, think about it. Every sunset, every genuine laugh, every act of kindness, it all takes on a new level of significance.
Yeah, because you're not experiencing it just once. You're experiencing it countless times. It's almost like, training your brain to find the hidden gems in every repetition.
I love that. Instead of dreading the mundane, you're actively seeking out those sparks of joy, those moments of connection, however small. And I think that can be a really powerful tool for dealing with adversity, too.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, knowing that challenges are also part of this eternal cycle, it can offer a unique kind of resilience. Like, imagine you hit a major setback, a job loss, a health scare, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Instead of getting completely swallowed by despair, you can remind yourself, okay, this too shall pass, and then it'll come back again, and pass again, and come back again.
So it's almost like instead of fearing hardship, we learn to, ride the waves, knowing that every challenge is just like a temporary wave in the vast ocean of our eternal existence.
It's about reframing our perspective, right? Instead of fearing failure, we can approach life with a sense of, like, courageous acceptance.
So we're not trying to control every outcome. We're learning to navigate whatever comes our way, knowing that we'll always have another chance to learn and grow.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really important aspect of all of this, self-care. Like, if you're going to be reliving this life over and over again, it's essential to treat yourself with kindness and compassion.
So no more burning the candle at both ends. No more pushing myself to the brink of exhaustion.
It's about recognizing that your well-being matters, not just in this life, but across all iterations of your existence. You only get this one body, this one mind, to carry you through eternity.
Okay, that puts things in perspective. So it's not just about achieving external success. It's about, like, nurturing my inner world too.
Exactly. In the grand scheme of things, those external achievements will eventually fade. What remains is the quality of our experience, the depth of our connection to ourselves and to others.
So it's about prioritizing those things that truly nourish us. Our relationships, our well-being, our sense of purpose.
Yes. And that leads us to another vital aspect, forgiveness. If we're going to be reliving our mistakes and regrets eternally, it's essential to learn to forgive ourselves and to forgive others.
Yeah, imagine carrying the weight of that grudge, that resentment, that bitterness across infinite lifetimes.
That's a heavy load to carry.
Forgiveness, though, it allows us to move forward. We learn from the past, but we're not chained to it.
It's incredibly liberating, and it allows us to experience each repetition with a greater sense of peace and acceptance.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Decision-making, goal-setting, gratitude, resilience, self-care, forgiveness. It's amazing to see how, like, a concept as abstract as eternal recurrence can actually offer some pretty practical wisdom for, just navigating life.
And we've only scratched the surface. There's still so much more to explore, especially when it comes to the emotional and spiritual implications of all of this.
All right, so we're back. And if you're just joining us, we're in the middle of a pretty deep dive into eternal recurrence. We've talked about the philosophy, the practical applications, but there's one more layer we need to explore.
The emotional side of things.
Right. Because let's be real, the idea of reliving every single moment, the good, the bad, the truly embarrassing, can be, well, it can be a lot to handle emotionally.
It definitely pushes us to confront our full human experience.
Yeah, and for some, the thought of reliving past heartbreaks or failures might be, I don't know, kind of terrifying, especially if those wounds haven't fully healed.
Especially then, it makes you wonder, how can we really embrace this idea of infinite do-overs without getting totally bogged down by, the fear of reliving our worst moments?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do we find that balance?
Well, I think it starts with approaching the whole concept with a sense of curiosity. Like, instead of just shutting down those uncomfortable feelings, we can ask ourselves, what can I learn from this experience? How can this, even the painful stuff, shape me into a stronger, wiser person?
So it's not about, like, achieving some perfect emotional state. It's more about radical self-acceptance.
Yeah.
Warts and all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Embracing the messiness of being human, knowing that, yeah, even the messy parts are going to be repeated forever.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is. And that process of self-discovery, it might involve facing some uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about our choices and values.
But maybe that's where the real transformation happens.
I think so. It's in that willingness to confront our shadow selves, to acknowledge our imperfections.
That reminds me of something you said earlier about Nietzsche, about how he endured so much hardship in his own life, and yet he still champions this idea of embracing the totality of life, even the suffering.
He saw those challenges as, like, essential parts of the human journey, not something to avoid, but something to learn from.
It's like he's saying, look, life's going to throw some curveballs. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to experience loss and heartbreak. But that's okay. It's all part of this grand, eternal tapestry.
And maybe, with each repetition, we develop a deeper capacity for compassion, for understanding, for resilience.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this idea could actually be really empowering. But let's talk about love for a second. How does this whole eternal recurrence thing impact our relationships with others? Knowing that we'll be reliving every interaction, every moment forever, that's got to be a game changer.
It definitely encourages us to be more mindful, more intentional in our relationships.
Because if you're going to be spending eternity with someone, you want to make those interactions count.
Exactly. It makes you really think about, like, the legacy you're creating with every word, every action.
So no more petty arguments. No more taking loved ones for granted.
Those things just create unnecessary suffering in the long run, in the very, very long run.
Instead, we focus on cultivating those qualities that really matter. Kindness, compassion, empathy.
Those become the foundation of our eternal connections. And those connections, in turn, give our lives meaning and purpose.
Wow, that's beautiful. It's not just about our own individual journey. It's about the collective human experience. The love, the laughter, the shared moments of both joy and sorrow. They all connect us.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together for eternity.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into eternal recurrence, I want to leave you with one final question. How would you live your life differently if you knew you were going to repeat it forever?
What choices would you make? What relationships would you nurture? What kind of legacy would you leave behind? Because in asking ourselves these questions and really wrestling with the implications of this concept, we might just discover the key to living a more meaningful, more joyful, and yes, a more eternally fulfilling life. Thanks for joining us.